Welcome to Khealos' Gaming Table. I'm Khealos. On this channel I talk about tabletop RPGs, miniature war games, and at least while I'm in Orlando I'm going to go for some rambling walks and talk about whatever comes to mind. Lately I've been talking about a bunch of my favorite franchises, but I think today I'm going to swing back to Battletech. Gaming specifically, Battletech. I was watching one of Big Red Tech's live streams, and I forget exactly how it happened, but it came up that, he absolutely didn't like the FedCom Civil War. He didn't like the story, didn't like the setup, didn't like the payoff, and didn't want to play it. And as the conversation or the chat went on, he also indicated that, he was at first eager to see what the Old Clan era was going to do, and then based upon what Khealos Game Labs has done with the story, he is no longer interested. That's his opinion. Fantastic. But it got me to thinking. There are many different eras of Battletech, and most people, while they might say that they don't have a favorite era or they like particular ones, I thought it'd be interesting to go through some of the different eras, provide my takes on them, and if you're watching, get some feedback from you, see what you think about the different eras. While Battletech does have numerous eras, not all of them, at least for me, I think would be fun to play. You've got the Star League era before the Civil War, and that might be fun to play, especially, if you've picked up the new, or I don't know how new it is anymore, the Proliferation Pack, where, it's got, I think, 6 or 7 original design mechs that help, build where the mech development went from there, from, going back to, the original Mackie. And then, that might be a little bit of fun, especially, since you would be playing with Star League tech, it wouldn't be rare or anything like that. I'm not sure how many scenarios are out for that, because that is, real ancient history. Well, I think moving past that, the American Civil War, well, I think that would be fun to read. I don't know how much I want to play that, because you want to talk about an absolute mother of a grinder. Especially, the initial stages when he launches the coup on Terra. It might be fun, playing the last stand of the Black Watch as they're, trying to retake the palace. Going to have some bagpipes playing in the background there, but, you want to talk about an absolute nightmare of just constant reinforcements. At least the siege of the Black Watch, eventually got broken when America started throwing nukes around. But you'd have to pick, some of the pivotal battles of that, and of which there are just so many different, mech regiments, formations, everything, not to mention, you have all the stuff going up in space, because, at that point in time there was still a Navy, and the great equalizer in any battle, especially on a planet, would be a Navy that can, basically, bombard you from orbit. But, it might be fun to read. I might watch a battle report. I'm not sure how much I'd actually like to play something like that, just because that would be, pretty brutal. Granted, it's a game. It's not real life, and it's, alternate history, but, interesting to see, if somehow the Ameris side turns it around and somehow conquers, the SLDF. Well, after the SLDF decided to leave the Inner Sphere, as far as anyone at that period in time knew, never to be seen again, you had the launch of the Succession Wars. The Succession Wars are basically every one of the great houses declaring themselves first Star-Lord and taking their armies to prove it. During the American Civil War, it was primarily between Stephen Ameris and the Rimworld's Republic forces and all the other forces he had accumulated in the Star League Defense Force. The great houses pretty much stayed neutral in the whole matter, because they didn't want to piss off whoever ultimately would win the conflict. They didn't want to go to bat for Kerensky, and then if Kerensky gets defeated, have Ameris come in, because he'd gone quite mad towards the end of the war, and there's no telling what horrors he would visit upon their planets and their people. And by the same token, if he had gone to, if the Great Houses is backed Eras and the SLDF came out on side, they would be seen as, traitors to the Inner Sphere, to the Star League, however you want to look at it. And same kind of thing. So basically, they just sat back and, built up their forces, watched, and waited to see who was going to come out on top. At the end of the Civil War, when it was clear that Eras was, had been defeated, that's when they started to move around again and start exercising power. They got together for one final meeting and unanimously stripped Kerensky of, I believe it was the title Protector of the Realm, and ordered him to disperse the SLDF, the Star League Defense Force, or at least the remnants of it. Kerensky knew what was coming, that each of those great houses would take any forces that they can and go ahead and try to establish themselves as the first Star Lord. Swords first, no diplomacy, or diplomacy at the end of a nuclear weapon. He met with all of his officers and gave them the option. He said that he could not be a part of such. He had spent the last 10 years killing his fellow men to rescue the Inner Sphere from Stefan Eras, and he did not want to be a part of whoever was going to take over after that, especially since they had stripped him of his titles and everything, So he gave them the option to either travel with him to parts unknown, or they could stay. They had fought for the better part of 10, 12 years, and he thought that they had the right to make that decision. Now, 80% of the SLDF decided to go with Kerensky, and they all, rallied together, took as much equipment as they could, filled all the drop ships, jump ships, warships, every ship that they could with people, materiel, the families of the soldiers, and as much food and resources as they could. And they jumped again, never to be seen again, at least as far as the Inner Sphere was concerned. And sure enough, the First Succession War started as each of the great houses declared themselves first Star Lord, and it was a no-holds-barred battle. In Battletech, you have a concept called the Eras Convention, and it basically, yes, it codified warfare and gave rules on how war would be conducted. Violate these rules, and the houses would unite against you. One of the big rules was, no killing of no deliberate targeting of civilian targets, and no weapons mass destruction. Things like nuclear weapons. Well, that all went out the window as the warships and the weapons that each of the great houses have been stockpiled got brought out. And for 35 years, the fighting was absolutely brutal. The problem was, the great houses often went with very much a scorched earth policy. And in the span of 35 years, several hundred years of progress and development was wiped out. If one of the great houses was trying to take like a mech factory or some sort of planet with resources, if they realized that they weren't going to be able to take it, they wanted to make sure that whoever was on the surface, whoever owned it, wasn't going to be able to benefit either, and glass the entire surface, sometimes making the entire planet uninhabitable. By the same token, if whoever owned that mech factory or whatever the piece of technology was realized that they were not going to be able to hold it against their opposition, well, guess what? They went ahead and destroyed it, because if they couldn't have it, nobody could. Nobody else could. So, in many instances, many worlds, a lot of the technology advancement ground to a halt and, in fact, regressed, sometimes, going back to 20th, 21st century. Going back to internal combustion engines, solar-powered things, and such. And again, that whole thing, in the Second Succession War wasn't much better. The drop ships that were used to transport materials and mechs to and from planets, the jump ships that allowed interstellar commerce and travel, those have been savaged in the First Succession War, and it continued into the Second. Now, during the First Succession War, Jerome Blake formed Comstar and pretty much took over Terra and castled it up. And ideally, at least as the stories go, Comstar would be neutral. They managed the hyperpulse generator network, the faster-than-light communication network that allowed communication to travel between planets, as opposed to having to send drop ships, which had to recharge at different stars, and that could take days or weeks. At any rate, Comstar, being the shifty bastards that they are, helped ignite the Second and Third Succession War by leaking information to different parties, because while Comstar was supposed to be neutral in all of this, it also had become something of a secretive cult, and wanted to keep all of the Inner Sphere great houses basically in the dark, keep them on parity with each other, and prevent technological advancement. And, they did that through the First and the Second Succession Wars. The Third Succession War, which ended, I think it was like 20, 30 years, ended in 3025. But the Third Succession War was different, as it was a lot less nukes and a lot more mechs. And usually this is about the time period that most players start, because a game of armor combat typically is set in 3025. Sure, you had, proxy and border skirmishes, or you might have full-on, engagements between different house armies, but there were no nukes. Shooting down, destruction of jump ships became very dangerous, because if they found out you specifically targeted a jump ship, you could be censured and have your own shipping rights revoked. Because, again, all of the massive manufacturing base that had been built up until the 2700s, a lot of it had been completely destroyed, and there were only a handful of different factories that were still able to produce a lot of the technology that they would use. The Fourth Succession War, and post-Third Succession War is usually where a lot of players play. There's always that group of players that say, Battletech stops at 3025. Most because they don't like where the history goes after that. But the technology, while it's great to learn from, it does get a little bit stagnant. And me personally, I do like playing the Third Succession War or post-Third Succession War into the Fourth. But I do like where things start to get a bit better, technologically speaking, after the home memory core starts to get distributed. Grayson Carlisle and the Grey Death Legion, while fighting for their lives on the planet of Helm, discover an ancient Starleague cache, and they're able to get a copy of a functional memory core. Think a big hard drive with all kinds of schematics and things on it. Not just war stuff, not like weapons and armor and different technologies like that. We're talking water purification, air purification, different types of engines, modern conveniences that really had been lost. And what Carlisle did was he took that memory core and he made lots of copies of it, and he distributed it to all of the great houses and the minor ones as well, because he wanted everyone to have a level playing field. True to form, Comstar did try to stop this, but eventually all of the great houses got a copy of the Helm memory core, and it allowed them to fill in the blanks for a lot of research and technological projects that they had been working on. Things like, granted, this is, for weapons, and the game is about war, like ER weapons, extended range weapons that, had a longer range, LBX weapons, autocannons that could fire both either a slug shot or they could fire a scatter shot like a shotgun, and other things like that. And the Fourth Succession War ran, I think, until like 30, 40 something, maybe a little bit later, right about the point that the clans decided to invade. And the clan invasion, which runs from, technically 3049, although most people classify it as 3050, all the way until I think 3062. Don't quote me on that, because again, I don't have it memorized. I don't have Wikipedia, Sarna, or any of the other resources up. I'm going off of my memory, which is a dangerous proposition to begin with. And the clan invasion is, the true turning point of the setting, because the descendants of the SLDF return to the Inner Sphere, and not in a take us to your leaders, more of a we are now your leaders. They came to conquer. And a lot of people, based upon things that I've read and seen, the clan invasion is probably the most popular and most played era of Battletech. A lot of people were introduced to the clans during MechWarrior 2, the clans, the old computer game. And it introduced a bunch of new weapons, because the clans, unlike the Inner Sphere, over that 200-year period of time from the Exodus until the clan invasion, didn't nuke themselves into the Stone Age. Excuse me. I mean, sure, they had their own little fights and such, but they actually had 200 years of near unparalleled technological development, and being the clans, they put most of that into weapon development. I took the the Star League extended range weapons and made them better. Your Star League era ER PPC is going to have a longer range than your regular PPC. It's going to generate 15 points of heat as opposed to the standard 10, and it's only going to do 10 points of damage. Your clan ER PPC, on the other hand, is going to have a longer range than your standard PPC. It's still going to have that 15 points of heat, but it's going to do 15 points of damage. So you're getting a bonus there. The clans also improved heat sinks, and specifically double heat sinks. Basically, it's a heat sink that dissipates twice the amount of heat. And the clans are able to put these on a lot of mechs. So yes, your ER PPC is going to generate 15 points of heat, but when you've got enough heat sinks to dissipate that heat, you can fire those without fear of possible shutdown. Other technological advancements, the XL engine, clan XL engines. So normally a battle mech with a standard fusion engine is going to have 3 criticals in its torso for the engine. You destroy those 3 engine criticals, boom, the mech's done. The XL engine is a lighter engine, and it allows the mech to move faster. The downside is it actually takes up points in your center torso as well as your left and right torso. But with the clan XL engine, it only takes up 2 critical spots in either the left or the right. So if, there's an ammo explosion and your case goes off and you lose your entire left torso, yeah, you've got 2 engine hits, but you can still work your way off the field. The problem is with the Inner Sphere or the old Star League XL engines, it's 3 slots. So if you lose your left or your right torso, guess what? Your mech is done, because all 3, you can only take 3 engine hits, no matter whether it's one in the left, one in the right, or one in the center. You lose a torso and you have an XL engine, that's it, man. Dishes are done. And another big improvement with the clan ER PPC, regular PPCs have a 3 hex minimum range. Basically, the closer that you get, the harder it is to actually get connected to shoot somebody with a standard PPC. Now, with the clan ER PPC, there's no minimum range, so you run up on that Timberwolf with 2 ERPPCs, it's going to eat you for lunch. Same thing with their LRMs. With LRMs, the way that they put it is it takes like 6 hexes for the missiles to fully arm and become dangerous. And the closer that you get within that 6 hexes, the more difficult it is for the gunner to actually, hit its target. The clans don't have that limitation, so anyone that was hoping to get within, 2 or 3 inches of, again, say a Timberwolf 2 LRM-20s, they're going to get, a face full of missiles and then a face full of, lasers. But with the clan invasion, the Inner Sphere started to get, more of that kind of tech through salvage, capturing additional, clan battle mechs, that kind of thing, and they're able to start reverse engineering some of that or incorporating it. And, this is my fine line, because I like a lot of the clan tech and, some of the Inner Sphere, tech that goes up there, but it's not, at least for me, it's not too overwhelming. So after the clan invasion, and again, these are the Third, Fourth Succession War and clan invasion are the areas that I actually know the best, as much as I know about, the history and the lore. There are, actual people that have more of it memorized. Well, the Fourth Succession War started with the Federated Commonwealth and the Federated Sons and the Lyran Commonwealth merging through marriage. A tale as old as time, two giant political factions merging through marriage. And as a gift to his wife, I think it was Hans Davian, basically offered her the Capellan Confederation. And at the time of their wedding, the forces had already been en route to invade the Capellan Confederation, and shenanigans ensue. Well, after the clan invasion, there was a huge civil war between inside of the Federated Commonwealth, and called it, ultimately called the FedCom Civil War. I don't know the full details about it, but basically, people in power don't like to share it, especially if they're married, especially if they're supposed to be the respective leaders of their nations. And instead of going to, I guess, marriage counseling or something like that, they instead decided to launch a war against each other, and, the Federated Commonwealth, broke apart. I don't know much about that era, but, during this time frame, you also have, like, Operation Bulldog, where the Inner Sphere, there is a brief reformation of the Star League, and they wanted to show the clans that they mean business, and that's where they launched Operation Bulldog. They picked a specific clan, in this case Smoke Jaguar, went to the homeworld of Huntress and effectively wiped out the clan, killing its gene seed banks, all of that stuff, and basically raising it to the ground to show them, don't mess with the Inner Sphere. And that might be fun to play in, just because, it's always fun to kick down on the clans, especially when you're on more of a technological parity. The big issue with a lot of the clans is their technology is better, but due to the battle value points, they're severely outnumbered against the Inner Sphere. When the clans originally, the first clan invasion, if you will, in the mid-90s, when FASA introduced them, there was no battle value or combat value or anything like that. Almost everything was exclusively played by tonnage. Well, having played that era, the big issue that you're going to run into is when you play by tonnage, the clans are going to outclass the Inner Sphere on almost every front. Because you take Timberwolf Prime, 2 LRM-20s, ER large laser, ER medium laser, and I think some machine guns in there. And even if you throw that up against, say, a Mad Cat with ERPPCs, and yeah, we'll be nice, we'll throw them, or a Marauder, excuse me, not a Mad Cat. You know, throw in some ERPPCs and we'll be generous and give them some heat sinks. Some double heat sinks, you know, to eat up that additional heat. They're still going to get their lunch eaten unless they get some really lucky shots. So anyone that wants to play tonnage with clans, tell them tell them where they can go. There's a reason that Battle Value 2 now exists, and that's because, you know, Clan Tech is going to outclass anything the Innersphere has, at least during that period of time. So, jumping back to the FedCom Civil War, one of the things that I didn't like, the little bit that I know, is within Comstar there was a faction called the Word of Blake. And the Word of Blake were basically true religious fanatics, treating, you know, Jerome Blake's word as the gospel. And they didn't like where Comstar had started to become more secular, so they started to launch I can't say that. I believe it was MacFrog that coined the term the Word of Blake kerfuffle. And basically, from out of nowhere, with little to no warning and no plausible, at least for me, way to do it, the Word of Blake somehow came up with a bunch of mech armies and launched an all-out invasion, you know, attack on the Innersphere. And on top of that, they decided to use, you know, go back and use nuclear weapons. The Ares Convention had been enforced since the Second Succession War, and they completely violated it. On top of that, one of the reasons that a lot of fans don't like the kerfuffle was because many of the classic and popular, you know, mercenary companies, you know, whether it's the Grey Death Legion, whether it's Snords Irregulars, I think they're in there, but a bunch of them were wiped out, but they didn't even get a good story or a good campaign or anything like that. It's more like a footnote in a source book. Oh yeah, and the Grey Death Legion was, you know, completely wiped out on, you know, this planet, you know, thanks to nuclear weapons. Whatever the case is, it's not very good. And then the Innersphere, and to a lesser extent the clans, united and fought off the Word of Blake, you know, wiping them out effectively. And which takes us into the next era, when FASA closed its doors in 2001. FanPro picked up the mantle and you know, continued the story forward with some of the writers from FASA. And then Jordan Weissman decided to start MechWarrior Dark Age, which was a Clicks version of Battletech, but it was a collectible game, and introduced us to the Dark Age. And the Dark Age is just as it sounds. I don't think they've revealed who's done it. There's a lot of speculation, but effectively, like 80 or 90% of the HPG network, the Hyperpulse Generator network, the communication network, goes offline, and nobody can get it to function anymore. You know, imagine today, all of a sudden, the internet and all telecommunications just cease to work. You might be able to, you know, drive from place to place. You might be able to rig something up, but, you know, New York can no longer talk to London, or, you know, Los Angeles can no longer communicate with, you know, Honolulu or any city. And that's where the Dark Age comes in, and, you know, a whole new series of wars starts, as, you know, because it's Battletech, and if there isn't war, you know, we're not having fun, apparently. And I don't know a whole lot about this age. I never got into the Dark Age or HeroClix, the clicky tech, however you want to look at it, mostly because it's a collectible game, and I find that to be distasteful, because, you know, they're preying on that dopamine hit and that desire for people to get specific mechs, and it is just not fun for me. Because people are going to spend a lot of money to get, that particular mech or that unit or whatever. And I'm not. I wasn't going to. I watched several games. I thought it looked interesting. I liked how everything was tracked on the base as opposed to having to worry about a sheet, but never got into it. Well, during the Dark Age, a man by the name of Devlin Stone appears. No real backstory. Nobody knows much about him. And somehow he rose to prominence and created the Republic of the Sphere. He managed, with Comstar effectively destroyed and also the Word of Blake, he managed to take over Terra and create a new republic. He wouldn't call it another Star League, but story-wise, I don't know exactly how he does it. Effectively, he gets people to power down their armies and return to more civility, at least until the the hyperpulse blackout happens. And that goes on from like 3080 until the early 3100s, maybe 3125, somewhere in there, where technology continues to advance. And my big issue with a lot of these eras is the technology. There's just so much new stuff. It's all in like TAC Ops or Total Warfare, but it's just a lot to keep track of, and a lot of it can be really abused. Fusion weapons, tasers. Can't imagine a mech with a taser that shuts things off. You start getting in crap like I forget what it's called, but it's effectively heavy armor that takes 2 points of damage to scratch off 1 pip of armor, that kind of thing. And there's just so much to keep track of. And for me, that becomes too much like work, and I don't want to deal with it. And I totally get why some players don't want to get into Battletech, because they do see it as more as work. It's just, I really don't want to deal with like C3 networks and all of that kind of stuff. Your mileage may vary, but I'll be perfectly honest, I don't think I've played in the Dark Ages. CGL has put out some recognition guides and some books where they take a lot of the mechs that were designed for MechWarrior Dark Age and actually gave them Battletech stats. And I'm pretty sure there's cards to use them in Alpha Strike as well. And then, that takes us into the Ill Clan era. And the Ill Clan era, quite simply put, is 100 years after the invasion of the Inner Sphere by the clans. Spoiler alert, yay! Clan Wolf, Clan Mary Sue actually does take Terra. And yes, I don't have a very high opinion of, Clan Wolf, because they're the hero clan, if there is such a thing. And no matter what, they always seem to prevail. I mean, you can write some of that, like the Battle of Tukia. They had gotten enough information from the Wolf's Dragoons. They knew how the Inner Sphere was going to fight, and they also knew that they didn't want to have long supply lines, so they packed a bunch of energy weapons. I can totally buy that in-game, but, the fact that nothing that any opponent can do seems to be able to stop Clan Wolf, I totally get why a lot of people don't like them. I mean, story-wise, they're kind of lame, kind of boring as far as I'm concerned, because there's no real challenge to them. They might have a minor setback, but, during the Hour of the Wolf, it was preordained that they were going to, conquer Terra. And, they even, when they invaded Terra, they also brought along the Jade Falcons and, managed to wipe out both the Jade Falcons and, the Republic of the Sphere that had managed to reinforce the entire planet, shift a bunch of their forces there. And, because Alaric Ward managed to conquer, defeat them all and, become the Ill Clan. I haven't read a whole bunch about the Ill Clan. I think that's the only novel of theirs that I've read in a while. Some of the mech designs look pretty cool, like some interesting. I'm not a big fan of the super heavy tripods. You know, those are too weird, and the fact that they take up so much real estate on a Battletech map. I mean, each hex is supposed to be, what, 30 meters across? And some of the models that I've seen, they take up like 2 and 3 hexes. That just, no, that's not fun. But, you know, your mileage may vary. However, you know, whatever my opinion is, or whatever, you know, other players' opinions are, that's the way that Khealos Game Labs is moving forward. Now, whether they change their tune and actually give the wolves some actual challenges, because sure, Clan Wolf took Terra, sure, you know, they're now the Ill Clan, you know, whatever the hell that means. But at the same time, not all the clans, and certainly not the Inner Sphere, seem to really care. And, you know, like a lot of things, there's some goalpost moving. It's like, you know, we have to stop them from getting Terra, you know, we have to keep them out. Oh, well, you go, okay, well, you can have Terra, you know, whatever, we're going to keep our stuff over here. But it's going to be interesting. I do want to start picking up some of the newer novels so that I can get, you know, up on the lore. Might pick up some of the source books just to see, you know, because I do enjoy reading, you know, stuff that's written in universe, especially if it's like, you know, reports, field reports, things like that. And a lot of the source books do have like little notes written in them to, you know, by people as they're reviewing a report or something like that. But, you know, those are the major eras of Battletech. I'll be honest, again, I've really only played Third Succession War, Clan Invasion. Guy back in Austin, he's running a new campaign that is set at the start of the FedCom Civil War. Basically, what he's trying to do is get everyone introduced to Battletech and some of the more advanced rules and equipment. And then he's going to set, you know, fast forward to the middle of the FedCom Civil War, and, you know, we're going to start getting things like rotary autocannons and other fun goodies. So I'm going to reserve judgment on that era, at least until I play it. Not knowing that particular era story-wise, I'm having more fun just because I'm not as beholden to the canon as a lot of people are. But what do you think? What era is your favorite era? Is there an era that you refuse to play? Is there an era that you wish more people would play? You know, I would probably play more if I had more time to actually sit down with some of the rules and look at the advanced stuff, like for whether it's the Dark Age or whether it's the Ill Clan era. I might actually play it a bit more, but that's a bit more homework than I'm willing to play. And I have made the mistake of somebody asking me, hey, do you mind if, you know, we play with some advanced rules? Well, actually, Sean didn't even let me know. He just suddenly brought in semi-guided munitions, and basically he could light me up with tag and have his catapult sit in the back and just hammer me with like little to no penalties. And, you know, that was bullshit as far as I was concerned. If he had warned me, that would have been one thing. But when you drop super tech like that on somebody and they're not prepared, that is kind of a dickish move. He did apologize, to be fair, and anytime we played after that, if he wanted to play with something new, he made sure to check with me or check with, you know, his opponent that he wasn't, you know, fixing to get them, you know, hit them with something they weren't prepared for. But what is your favorite era? What eras do you like? What eras do you don't like? Do you have a preference? Is there a piece of tech that you absolutely have to play in a certain era, otherwise you don't want to, you know, you have to play in that era to use that tech, otherwise you don't want to play at all? Like and subscribe, leave me some comments below, and I look forward to reading them. Cheers.